So we're starting off in the DentalDB as with every case. And Michael already explained it to you. We aim to design a partial framework in the end. So we have all of the posterior teeth set to partial framework. This will act as a kind of a dummy, a placeholder for the acrylic teeth in the end. On the two canines, where we will have the attachments and the milled linguals, we use telescopic crowns. On the teeth 1, 2, and 2, 2, we just have normal reduced pontics. The same on tooth 1, 1, it's just a reduced crown. But on tooth 2, 1, we have a custom abutment up here. And also for every tooth, we have activated the pre-op model. So for start, I'm just going to switch to the design. You see we're already using the Matera version for this. But the workflow itself works the same in the Valletta version already, or in the 2016 version. You can do this. Most of the features that are integrated there, you can use them the same way. So you can see here we have our antagonist, our pre-op model, which is an old prosthesis of the patient, and our scan abutment. And the first step is to correct the position of the pre-op model. And you can do this by just dragging it around, trying to position it by hand. But normally, you will try to use the automatic function for this. And since we have two healthy teeth here, I can just set points on the same positions for the pre-op model and the healthy teeth. Say, perform alignment, activate the best fit matching, and it fits. So for the next step, we have the virtual articulator, and I'm going to use that as well. For that, I think I'm going to hide the scan abutment and start a virtual articulator. The models in this case are already set in a perfect position for the articulator, so I don't have to correct them. I could do that up here with re-articulate the model virtually, but now I'm just starting the articulator movement. And why this calculates, you see the movement itself. We really recommend reusing the virtual articulator in every case where you have many teeth to replace, so the movement of the patient will be the same in the virtual world as in the real world as in your articulator in between. So the movement is calculated. Now up here, I have the repeat articulator movement dialog, where I can use the slider to reproduce all the directions of movement from the articulator again. So in the next step, I get the prompt to start the smile design. As you have seen yesterday, the smile design mostly is for the aesthetic functionality. But here in this case, I want to replace the whole jaw. And for all the posterior teeth, it's, in my eyes, way more important to get the right functionality than the aesthetics. So we start off with first placing all the teeth, and then use the smile creator for just the anterior teeth. But of course, if I now switch over the step, I can, at any given point in time, just switch to the expert mode and start the smile creator then. So the first thing I have to do is place my abutment position. I have here a scan abutment, as you see. And I'm using only my favorites for the different implant libraries. And I recommend to any one of you who has implant cases, abutment cases, just switch off the star up here for your implant libraries. Because as you might know, our implant library at the moment has over 2,000 several different kinds of implants, of abutments. So normally it's a bit of a hassle to look for the one you want to need. So if you already know, we're only using 5 or 10 different ones, set them as your favorites, and it's way faster that way. So I'm just pressing on one point on the scan abutment and click the best fit matching, and you can see it fits perfectly. Actually, if I press the control button while pressing the best fit matching, I even get a colorization, how well the fit is. So now I have to draw the emergence profile for the abutment. And normally for anterior teeth, this is a really important step, because you want to have an emergence profile that's very deep in the gingiva, so you don't see the abutment itself. But this is only the first step of setting the raw position of the emergence profile. Later on, there will be another step where I can design the whole shape of the abutment bottom. So for now, it's enough to just set a really crude approximation of what you will your abutment to look like later on. So now I'm setting the margin lines for the individual crowns. And as you see, the margin lines are already set. We do this for all our demo cases, and you can do this yourself if you use the model creator for that, because the model creator also gives you the function for every crown you set to set a margin line, and this gets saved, and you can reuse the same margin lines in your construction. So once you use the model creator in a job, the margin lines are already there, so you can create your own demo cases like that, or training cases, in cases that you have very many dies and don't want to do this every time you show the case to someone. This is a really easy way to forego this step. So for the crown bottoms, normally I would leave the normal parameters. I guess most of you already have parameters they are familiar with and love to use. A small trick I like to show, because there's very narrow dies here, and you see the milling compensation, especially here, is also on the labial side. And normally you would want to have this as thin as possible for the veneering later on. And I actually like to add another zone of gap, pull this up to the maximum, and just draw it. I have to click the button first. Just draw it here on the palate side of the dies. So this way, you can actually take control where the milling compensation has to be. So normally you have a little bit more space here for your veneering. It's just a tiny little bit, but in the world of dentistry, as most of you might know, this actually is a whole world. So now I get the option to just copy the teeth from our pre-op model, which is an old prosthesis. But I'm not going to do that, because we want to use the smile creator and use our own tooth libraries for this case. So I'm just skipping over it. And here are the teeth. I'm just switching off the true smile for that. And I'm actually going to use the pre-op model for orientation of which tooth library I will take for this case. Because you see, those are really triangular teeth with really prominent canines. And I'm switching, I'm loading custom model tooth by just clicking anywhere on the screen. And I get the option to choose a whole another library. And I'm taking, for this case, the alternative library, because as you can see, it has really edgy canines. They are really long, and it has a very triangular form as well. So just going to activate that. And now, as you might know, we have entered some new hotkeys in the Valletta version. Yeah, obviously still there in the Matera version. So when I press Shift and P, I can just activate the transparency of, in this case, the pre-op model. If you're ever wondering which key corresponds to which model, we have, on one hand, those mouse pads you may have seen already. On the other hand, you can just go over here and look at the tooltip and see there it says hotkey P for pre-op in that case. So to place the teeth, I'm going to use the chain mode. Has anybody here ever used the chain mode? Because it's one of those features you have to get into, and then you start loving it, but there's first a small hurdle of getting how it works, because it works a bit different than a singular tooth placement. But placing all of those teeth now would take like 15 minutes, and I don't think you want to see that. So the chain mode works in that way that all the teeth are moving in unison, and you can activate or deactivate those red dots here for them to be part of the chain or not. And the trick is to first just place one of the molars. I'm just taking this one here, and placing it where I want it to be, and ignore all the other teeth for that. Then I deactivate the movement of this disc here. And now I place the other molar, and you see it works in a chain. They never lose their contacts to each other. So, and if this molar is placed like this, remember those are just for dummies for the partial framework later, so the placement doesn't have to be perfect. So now that both of the molars are locked, I start working on one of the canines. And you see it starts getting visibly a bit harder to move it around. But still, I'm placing the canine, scaling it a little bit, and lock this as well. And now the last canine, you might see, really fights back when I try to move it, because it's a really short area I try to move. But I can lock it as well and still move it around, and now only the other teeth get scaled, and this stays always the same. I place this and scale it like in a normal single positioning. And now I'm just placing all the posterior teeth as well. For all the anteriors, I'm later using the smile creator. You see the contact points here. They're activated as dynamic. Because I use the virtual articulator, I can activate it. And so I see contact points for every kind of movement the virtual articulator could make in that instance. So I can really orient myself. Because as you might see, actually, there's no contact to the antagonist now, but there will be if I move the antagonist. So for now, I think this is OK. The anteriors still look bad, to be honest. But for this, I'm going to switch to the smile creator now. And I'm just switching to expert mode first. And in tools, I can actually select it at any point in time, as I told you. And now the smile creator starts. It's its own little wizard with all the steps guiding you through the process of doing that. The first thing to do would be loading a retracted image. This button here just gives me the option to load an image from my computer. The button next to it actually activates the webcam, and I could take a picture right now. But I always scare myself when I try that, so I'm not going to do that now. As well as I'm not the patient, so I'm just using a retracted image from our patient. Now I have to draw some corresponding points at a 3D model and at a picture. You've seen this process yesterday. And a small tip is the further apart those 2 points are, the better the picture will match the model in the end. I can still drag those points around if I ever make a mistake, click by accident anywhere else. And if I've done that, I'm pressing next. And now you see the overlay, the model behind the grayed out picture. It's a bit hard to see. You have to learn to get a view for that, actually. But it's after 2 or 3 times, I think everybody really gets it. You see in the grayed out image moving when I move those points around. And I'm just trying to place them in a way that both of the canines are perfectly overlapping. But you already see here in the sides how the pre-op model is way lower than the teeth in the photo. And on the right click, I can actually rotate the model. Because in this case, the jaw is tilted in a direction. And you see here, now it's aligning a little bit better than before. I can still move those points around for those perfectionist fields. And if I'm happy with the outcome, I'm just pressing next. And now I'll load a smile image of my patient. And you see here how the model aligned to the patient and how tilted it is actually. So with the smile image, now I can align this to the retracted image. The retracted image is a bit of you can understand it as a bit of a middle step between just helping you aligning the smile image with the models themselves. You still will use the retracted image in the workflow, though. And as Waldo told you yesterday, you can actually load way more pictures than those two. Those two are just the minimum amount of pictures you would need for a good smile design. And here again, I'm choosing 2 points. In this case, I already see that the canine is hidden behind the lip. So I'm choosing a point a little bit more in the middle. And now I'll align those 2 photos. And you already can see that the teeth are aligned perfectly. But the further you zoom out, you see that the photos were tilted a bit. So the eyes aren't overlapping perfectly. Now I have to draw a lip line around the mouth. And at that moment, I would actually like to thank Paul for his beautiful smile for this case, because he has not the normalest of lip lines, to be honest, and I don't mean that in a rude way, because it's really fun to work on a case that's not the complete standard case where you really see why you need smile design for some cases, because in a completely normal generic case for demonstrations, you wouldn't even need smile design because you can just place the teeth perfectly by hand. And I actually like to leave a bit of dark area here in the corners. I could cut this out as well, but this gives more of a realistic picture in the end. So in the next step, I have to put points on the middle of his eyes. You already see, I'm trying to move this a bit slower. Oh, I'm sorry. So that was a good case, yeah, really great work from me. Yeah, as you've seen, I clicked on the picture on the wrong point and then didn't delete the point, but just kept clicking, and that was the mistake. But in this way, it might now work, yeah. So you see all those steps again. Maybe now you understand what I'm doing a little bit better. So. OK, so we're back again. So I'm clicking on the patient's eyes, mostly in the middle of them. This will place our helper lines. You've seen them yesterday. You will see down here already our model teeth in an outline rendering. Those are actually model teeth. For now, I'm hiding them because I want to place those helper lines. And you see here, there's a ratio helper line like this. This is always a golden ratio. I can move this around. I could tilt it if I needed it to. I can actually choose another ratio for this case because those are very narrow teeth. I'm choosing the narrowest one and trying to match it as good as possible. And you already see, because again, maybe the picture was tilted or the jaw itself is tilted. It's hard to say from a picture that the ratio isn't the same on both sides. And this is one of those cases where smile design really comes in handy, because then you have a possibility to redesign a bridge in an aesthetic way which matches the patient. You would never design a bridge like that, as you might see in the next steps, if you didn't use the smile design. I can also place a laugh line here. And down here, I have the option to place even more lines. Also, you've seen this yesterday for like the nose width, but I'm not going to do that now. So, and here in this step, I can place my anatomical teeth here, and you see how tilted all of this is. I have 3 3D views here on the side. I can actually rotate those, but if I want my orientation back, I can just click on those arrows. And I can also switch between the outline rendering and the normal rendering. And you might have realized it, but the movement function is different from the normal placement of the teeth here, in a way that you can click those outline teeth and have a box around it, which you can rotate, you can move it around, and you can actually scale it like that as well. And this is mostly because moving those outline teeth in the normal way gets a bit confusing. So I'm trying to place them as close to nature as possible, but also I'm trying to design it in a way compensating this tilt over here. So I'm placing those incisors and the canine here a bit. I'm designing it a bit longer than it was before to compensate for, this tilt, as I mentioned. So at first, I'm just taking a look at this view here and trying to place it as good as I can. Now, when I think, OK, this is for now close enough, I'm taking a look at those 3D views and can change them here as well. And you see it moves in all of them at the same time. And now I can actually try to rotate the teeth in a way so you get the sharp edges from the canines, for instance. Also, using this view, I will already see, oh, that's the wrong tooth. I can already see how the tilt of the teeth themselves actually is and correct that. And here I have actually 2 views. so I can use both sides. So for now, I think this looks pretty nice. And I'm going to freeform it a little bit. I have the option to freeform here. And it's just a normal freeform. It just looks different because of the outline, you see. But it works the right way. And if you look over here at the 3D view, you can actually see the freeforming happening live. So I'm just pulling those two in. Now I'm, I think, pretty close to the original outline. And hit OK. I can actually also activate measurements for the teeth I'm moving around. If you already have those from your dentist, you can reproduce it like in nature. So in the next step, I'm going to choose the color. And there are several ways to choose the color in the software. Because as most of you might be aware, it's nearly impossible to choose a tooth color from a photo, because it's based on the lighting while the photo is taken, on the camera, on the screen you're watching this on. So you never will get the real tooth color. So we have a color rendering which is as close as we think you can get at the moment. We're always improving that as well. And here you have some standard colors to choose from. And as you might see, they don't really look like the colors in the picture at all, because even if we took his real tooth color and chose this here in the picture, it may look different at the end. With this in mind, we have a slider here to match the color of the picture with a higher or lower saturation. And also, you can use those standard color presets and drag them around, and it gives an approximation of all the colors around it. If I choose two colors and drag it left and right, you already see how it's changing a little bit. Those colors aren't that different, but if I use those, you see it. And for this case, I'm choosing the B4. It looks completely different for the moment. Dragging it a bit to the C4 and giving it a little bit lower saturation. But it's still not a perfect match. But I want to show you the other option, the custom color selection, where you have sliders like you might know them from Photoshop. We could use those. We could also use this color picker. And there's actually two colors here, the base color and the highlight color. And for this, I want to change the base color. And I'm clicking on a dark point. And it's matching the photo more closely. And now I can actually go a step back to the placement, and activate here the preview. And it's in the color I just chose. And now I can see, for instance, that this premolar here doesn't look that good positioned, or this one over here, because with the color, it's easier to see the posterior teeth. But I'm leaving it as it is now. I can now copy this image to a clipboard or just save it as a file. It gets saved in your project directory as everything you design, somewhere down here. And now you can send this to your patient and ask him if this is what he wants to look like, and hopefully he will say yes. And then you just say, perfect, I'm done. I'm switching back to the wizard. And now you can actually see how the smile design works with the pictures, because if you tilt this, you see the model is just in between. And those pictures are now part of the project, and I can hide them, obviously, because here, those the 2D images point. And I can hide the retracted one. And maybe interesting, I can actually hide the clipping of the smile as well. But now I tilted the picture, and I get automatically here a smile design view, which sets the direction back to the view of the smile design. You can also get this view by just double-clicking on the picture itself. So, but for now, I'm hiding those pictures and deactivating the true smile, because now I'm trying to work on the abutment a little bit more. So we were in the chain mode. This hasn't changed yet, just the outline of the anterior teeth. And I'm just going to the next step, where I set now the bottom of the abutment, as I said before. I'm going to do that later. This is now later. For that, I'm hiding my antagonist, my pre-op model, the screw channel, and my anatomic teeth. I just want to see the model itself. And I can actually make the model a bit transparent. Then I see the bottom even better. And I like to place more control points here, because I personally really like to stay in control when I'm designing. And with those points, as you might know, I can move them around. And if I hit Control, all of them move at the same time. And I'm just dragging them a bit inwards for now. This one maybe a bit up. And as you might know, those pink points down here mean that they are connected to the gingiva. You can never move them away from the gingiva. But if I deactivate it, I can. And I can actually activate and deactivate it using Control for all of them at the same time. Now, I'm just dragging all of them a little bit lower. And you might wonder, how am I supposed to know how low I actually pulled them? Because this is actually really important. I'm activating the cut view, but I'm not just activating the cut view here. There's actually an option for that. You can choose any part here, like here my abutment bottom, right-click on it, and choose the Show Cut here. And the cut is actually placed exactly at the abutment. For a case like this, it might be even better to choose the screw channel because it's the right direction. And you see now, here in the cut view, there's my abutment. I like to deactivate the rotation, so this picture stays the same even if I rotate the model. And when I zoom in here, I see my abutment bottom. And I can measure it, and it's 0.3. That's exactly what I was aiming for. And so you can be sure it's not too deep or too high from the gingiva. So I'm deactivating this again. And now I'm designing the bottom part of the abutment. And this curve here is really important because you don't want to have any dirt in between here, but you don't want it to have too much pressure on the gingiva as well. But at least a little bit pressure is what you're aiming for normally. So I like to choose this button here to get more of a convex shape, like this, and then sliding this bottom angle a bit back. And you get a real smooth shape here. And then I'm just pressing next, and all of the anatomical teeth get connected to their crown bottoms. You can actually activate the True Smile again, and you see all of them in the same color for the moment. Deactivate it. And now, I'm going to hide the screw channel here. I can freeform those teeth. I mean, most of you might already know the step freeforming. I mean, or else you might have not used the DentalCAD until now. And I'm going to leave most of it as it is, because I placed the anterior teeth with the smile design. The posterior teeth are mostly important for the partial framework later on, and will actually get replaced by acrylic teeth. What I'm doing is the adaptation to the antagonist and the base and the approximal contacts. And I can do this by just hitting here, cut all intersections. And since I use the virtual articulator, it automatically uses the dynamic intersection cutting for the occlusal side. So you see now here, all the contacts have been cut. I can actually activate this button by just hitting Control and X. And in the same way, I can hit Control and space for the next step as well. So now I can adapt the teeth to the pre-op model. I'm not going to do that in that case again. And now there's the insertion direction for my abutment. And you would want to have your abutment in a kind of same insertion direction as the rest of the bridge, but in a direction pointing to the incisal edge of the teeth. So you can actually design a really long abutment if you want to. And there's space for that in there. So this is a good direction. And now I'm designing the upper part of the abutment. I'm just turning this around. So I actually got told that I tend to turn the models quite frequently and really fast. So if any one of you gets sick, you might want to ask for a bag or something, but I'm trying to slow down. So I normally start moving all the control points completely to the outside, and as always, add some more of them. And here on the back side as well. So now I can actually design a bit of an edge here. I can take my antagonist in consideration and see if there's enough space for it, and it is, even more than here. But I'm pulling down those control points here, so I have nearly the same length as the other dies. And now the points in the front, I try to push a bit inwards, but they're already at the limit. But this looks OK. Because now in the next step, I can actually freeform this abutment as well. And here, in a case like this, I like to add some material here. And in the freeform function, there's also hotkeys, so I can just press the button 1, and the add remove function is already activated. And I'm just adding here some material. To get a normal filled-out abutment, I can actually activate the screw channel to see where it's actually important, because the screw channel will be cut out in the end. So here, there's a bit of a smoother body for this abutment. And I can actually smooth it here as well, so it gets a little bit thinner. But for things like that, I have to know which material I'm using and not risking that the abutment might break in the end. So I have to be a bit cautious with that. So now I'm going to the next step, which is the telescope insertion direction. Because the milled linguals we're designing are based on the primary telescopes, or the German crowns, as they say in all other countries but Germany. And for this, I have to set the insertion direction for the attachments as well. And here's the crux of it. As always, if you try to place attachments and looking for insertion direction, it's an art in itself. It's never really working the way you would want it to work. And here, if I'm making the model a bit transparent, I can actually see undercuts here, because at the end, I'm going to place clasps here. But you also see, I can't really get undercuts on this teeth without tilting the model completely, and this is not a good insertion direction. So I'm choosing something like this, where at least here I have some. And they're also a bit in unison with the dies themselves. So now I'm designing the telescopes. And this is actually the step, in my eyes, is the most interesting about this whole project here. Because designing milled linguals is not that easy on first glance. You don't really just find it yourself. It seems a bit more complicated. It's actually not that hard to do, but you wouldn't find it yourself. We have a video of that on our YouTube channel, actually. But I'm just using the telescopic crowns. And first, I pull out this border down here to secure my gingiva. And here, as always, using control, I can move all the points at the same time. And now, this will actually be the lower shoulder of the milled lingual. Now I'm pulling out some points here, 2 of them actually, to get a bit of a parallel or a plane surface here where I can place my attachment in the end. And the lower shoulder will not be here in the end, at this point. So now I'm trying to get all of those points here on approximately the same height. And you may see why later. Because now I'm taking all the upper control points, pull them out as far as I can, pull them down, up again, and a little bit inward. And so they're all at the same position regarding the lower control curve, or the middle control curve. And you may, if you ever design telescopes using this module, have seen those weird yellow and green buttons and maybe already hit them by accident and wondered why everything looks different now. Those actually show what kind of surface the area between 4 points actually is. The green one is the parallel surface. The yellow one is just a conical surface. So if I hit this, it changes. For now here, normally it's the yellow one. I'm changing it to green, so I get a bit of a shoulder because it tries to design a parallel surface here. And I'm also hitting other buttons. If I pull this up, you see the parallel surface. But for a shoulder, this is enough. And now I'm trying to get this really plain. Now, using my anatomy here, I can orientate where the points at the end have to be placed. You will see what I mean with that right away, because I'm pulling them out a bit. Because here, the rotation lock will be placed in the end. For that, I need a bit of space here. You can actually always activate more points if you need those for more control. And now that this is so far finished, I activate those points to switch them to anatomical shapes. Now you see I have a crown with a milled lingual here with an anatomical shape in the front. And I can and will actually shrink this later. But you can also just leave it as anatomical shape, obviously. So I'm designing the same one over here. So pulling up the lower border to secure the gingiva a little bit. Then I'm designing here a plane surface for the attachment. If this happens to you, just make the model transparent. Everything is good. So now I'm trying to position the points mostly at the same plane, especially the ones on the lingual side. The other ones actually don't matter, but I just do it out of habit. And now, again, I pull those points outward, downward, upward, inward, and switch it to parallel, and I have my shoulder. Here a little bit of more space. Maybe add another point to correct this. And now again, I'm changing the vestibular part to anatomical shapes. Okay. That's it with that for now. I can actually pull this even out more if I want to. Sometimes, in some cases, it's necessary, in others, it's not. And now, I'm just going to the next step. This is it for now for the milled linguals. Because now I can actually freeform, like in all the telescopic crowns, I could now freeform it, but only the anatomical parts and the ones up here in between the upper curve are activated for smoothing. So I can't smooth the parallel surface. But there's nothing I want to do here now, so I'm just going to the next step. And now the construction is finished, and you might wonder that's not it. There's something missing. I want to delete old files. That's just the abutment, because the bridge on top of the abutment is a suprastructure, obviously. And maybe you would want to first mill the abutment, scan it again, and then design a suprastructure. But we're doing this right now, because you can actually do it all on one sitting. And it's generating a crown bottom for the abutment as well. I could change this now, but I'm leaving it as it is. And now I can change my reduced parts, those 4 here in the front. And I'm reducing them by 0.8 in this case. And going to the next step. And you see now all the anatomical parts, I could actually freeform them right now. There's no reason for me to do that at the moment, but I could. And there's also the anatomical shapes of the telescopes, but not the telescopes themselves. They're grayed out. I can't freeform them now. But what I can do is switch to the expert mode, and now I have the option to choose shrink telescopic anatomy. So, and now you see 2 telescopic crowns, and the milled linguals are marked in blue. They're safe. They won't be shrunken if I press the button. And I can't even delete this color here, but I can add blue color here to make safe borders. How much of that you want to color may actually be based on your milling machine. Doing it just like that for a small gap. So then at the end there will be metal, and the veneering will start here at the yellow color. So I'm doing the same here. As many of you might be aware, if you press the Shift button and scroll the mouse wheel, the size of the brush actually changes, which is really useful in those cases. So for now, this is OK. Activate the transparency so you actually can see when they're shrinked. And I'm changing the depth to the same I used for the other teeth and apply it. And now if I press OK and switch back to the wizard, those are actually hidden now, but they're shrinked, as I just did. And now I could go to the next step. One thing you have to keep in mind is the basis of the pontics. Because normally they look like this, but you want to smooth them a little bit. So there's, at the end, at the bridge, there's no hole in there where all the food will be stashed for the patient for later use. And now I'm just connecting the whole bridge. In cases like this, I like to use a little bit of a thinner connector, and I also like to use this droplet shape here, because the anterior teeth are very bottom heavy, and the shape is as well, so they complement each other a little bit. So, and then the parts with the telescopes, I actually will need to freeform my connectors a little bit, but just a little. Okay. So, and now this whole part gets merged. But I'm still, again, going to freeform the whole restorations. Because if I freeform a merged restoration, actually none of the parts except the crown bottom is safe. So I can freeform on everything. I could actually just start smoothing the midlinguals if I wanted to. But why would I want to? But I could. And I'm hiding all those dummies for the partial framework for later. Because in this step as well, I can add attachments, and this is what we wanted, right? It says so right on the title card that I'm going to place some attachments here. So in the attachment library, the first one is the generic attachment, which actually is the Prezi-Vertex attachment. You can just click here, and it normally gets placed parallelized already to the insertion direction of the primary telescope. So it is parallel to the midlingual already. If I ever think, well, I'm going to tilt this in any way or place it wrong, I can right-click on it and parallelize it to any other part if I want to. So I'm going to just place this here and activate the cut on gingiva. Yeah, this looks good. And I'm doing the same one over here. Now, the even more interesting part than that are the rotation locks in the midlingual, where I'm also using attachments, but I'm going to subtract them. And here, as you might have already seen, are many shapes, but also some kind of weird informations here, like parametric rotation, which gives you the different shapes normally used for bars, and you can build attachments out of them. See, there's many shapes, and I'm looking for a specific one, this here. Because in this, I can actually place it. It's also parallelized. And then now I can even change the parameters. And if I change the height, you will see it gets longer. And it's a bit of a round shape. And I can use parameters completely used for the rotation lock I want to have at the end. So for the width, I'm going to choose 1.5. And for the radius, because I want to have a real smooth radial up there, I'm going to choose half of that. And now I can place it anywhere I want. I can actually use the transparent version of the bridge, and here I see the minimum thickness. I can place it in regards to that. I think this position is good. And if I apply, it will get cut out. You see. I'm placing one on the other side as well. And now the interesting part is because this goes through the minimum thickness. And normally, if you go through the minimum thickness, the software will build it up again because you can't hurt it. But if I apply the allow any changes, I actually can hurt the minimum thickness. And I chose a minimum thickness of 0.6, so it's already way too big for a metal crown. So if I do that, it will work in the end. But it takes a bit longer than you're used to. Oh, it will not work in the end. OK, I'm placing it again. What I actually can do, it's kind of nice that it didn't work, so I can show this to you. I can switch to the freeform right now, and the attachment still is in place. I can use a transparent version of the attachment. and start freeforming here as well. If I see here this area doesn't look how I want it to look, I can actually apply a kind of safety border here and delete this one up here because I don't want it. And I can switch back to the attachment step, and still I can pull it around. So now this works. So I can still freeform this now. And for this, I recommend using the visual property of the flat shading, where you see all the triangles of the STL. And here, using the smoothing and pressing Control, I can smooth this border here without hurting it too much, as you see, which will make it easier to insert the attachments in the end for the patient. So here as well. And that's that. And I think I'm going to leave it at that. So I'm saving this because I freeformed the merge restoration. It's asking me about that. And this is my finished bridge. And if I'm not sure, if I say maybe the sign is not good, I don't think what you will think about that. I think it's so-so. Maybe I want to show it to someone like my dentist, or normally maybe my boss in the dental lab. Maybe he's not there. I can actually just send him a web view link for that. And that's easily done. Just activate it like that. This looks good. He has the option to see everything he needs. And I can just right-click on Save and share the scene via Dental Share Web View link, or use an HTML export. The HTML export actually is kind of the same. You just save a file on your computer. But the Dental Share uploads it directly to our Dental Share network for, I think, 90 days. Then we're going to delete your data because we don't want to have your data. We're not Google or anything. And if I'm uploading this, it gives me a link. And I hope you don't think of me rude because I'm taking out my cell phone for this. And I click on the link, and I just open it in my normal web browser, like every browser this works with. And it also works on your smartphone. That's why I took this out. I think you've already seen this yesterday. I'm sorry. You've seen this yesterday in the demonstration from Larry. The web view, as I said, works in every browser, but we also have an app for that for the smartphones. And here you can see the whole restoration. And you can hide and show all the parts as you are used to in your DentalCAD. And you can use this to show this to your dentist or your boss or your friends if you want to be to show them how cool your designs are. And it's a good function for that, but you can also, as I said, use the HTML export, and you get a file for that again in your project folder, which is just an HTML file you can open with your browser as well, so you can send it by email if you don't want to use a link. So, and what does the time say? Oh, 5 minutes, that's good. What we also can do, what we actually were able to do for a long time now, but we're still improving this with every iteration of the software, is use 3D scan files of your face. Whole face scans, because they're getting a bit more popular now. And for this, you just add a mesh like you would a pre-op model or anything else. And we obviously prepared a 3D face scan for that. And here's the option to take a face scan, load it, so, and here it is. And now you have to actually kind of align those two meshes, which isn't super easy to do, but it works. And for that, I'm hiding everything except my pre-op model. This is what I want to use for that. So because I can normally align the meshes, and here you have to place, as you may have seen several times, just some points on both meshes so they get aligned. But the trick for this is not to design one line of points for this, like you would maybe do, just take the intercessor edges here. but actually create kind of a triangle of points. So I'm performing the alignment, and it looks OK. And I can actually have another option, the face correct placement, where I can move the face scan around, scale it, rotate it. I'm not going to do it because the alignment looks OK for me. But I can also edit those meshes. Like I can edit any mesh at all. I can also freeform it, but it would be kind of rude to do that on stage. And here, I can mark teeth. It's a little bit similar to the smile design. I just mark this area here, delete it, and now this isn't the nicest of looks. I can actually show my models and my merged parts and my anatomy. And if I actually use smile design for that, I can get kind of an impression what it may look like, even from the sides. So, OK. So that's it for that case. I think we have 3 minutes left. In the next session, I'm going to design a partial framework based on that case. But in the case we're using, I'm not just reusing the same bridge I designed. We actually have a model of the scanned bridge already with the veneering, how you would do it in the lab. Because if you try to design an attachment bridge with a partial framework on top of it, you may have to rescan it actually because it would fit better in the end.